Hey Future Me. So I was just in Manila doing a study tour with MIEA and PAREB, and I find Manila, Philippines to be such an interesting city. From the moment you touch down, you look out your left window, and everything's so small, so dense, yet so vast. Then you look out your right window, you see skyscrapers, huge monolithic blocks, towering above everything else, and you realize how two completely different worlds just live side by side. Now, have a look at this map. Metro Manila is filled with many little pockets of CBDs and high security residential homes owned by the rich, surrounded by a sea of slums. Pockets of first world infrastructure surrounded by dense third world slums. Now, a few other interesting things that caught my eye. I stayed in BCG, which is one of the more sought after places in Manila, and the roads felt wider. They felt less dense and cleaner, like a more open version of KL. And I noticed that every building I walked into has a metal detector, security guards, security dogs even. And that's not normal. So why? So I did some digging and I found an article saying Manila crime rates rises highest in Southeast Asia. But is it really that different from the rest of us? You take a look at this map. This map basically shows the crime rates across Southeast Asia and the globe. And we're not very far away actually. Now, did I feel safe when I was there? Well, I think that depends where you are. I think it has a lot to do with the security guards, who are actually more doormen and traffic controllers than actually armed security. And from what I heard, it has more to do with the great divide between the rich and the poor than rampant crime requiring near airport levels of security at every door. And I think this is a very important first step in kind of understanding, what's going on in Manila and the Philippines, and how this drives demand and supply and the property market in turn. For many of us who grew up in Malaysia, Philippines is where my kakak was from, who helped take care of me until I was 8 before she went back, and for others until now even. And they've been away for over 25 years, maybe even more, constantly sending money home. And the airport even has a specific queue for them. It goes Filipino passports, foreign passports, and overseas Filipino workers, OFW. They're also the largest BPO in the country, meaning call centers, which tells you a little bit something about their economy. And what I've learned through the developers we've met through our very generous host, PAREB, is that despite all this, Metro Manila properties are more expensive than Malaysia. But why? Now, this fun tour was hosted by PAREB, Malaysia's equivalent of MIEA, and as expected of our Filipino friends, there was a lot of knowledge, hospitality, and a whole of spontaneous singing. And throughout this event and some research, here's what I learned about the Philippines. So the top developers like Ayala, DMCI, Mega World, SMTC, etc., they all have their own target markets and focuses. But the hottest property class, high-rise condominiums. See, land is scarce, and scarcity creates value. And in Metro Manila, this is critical. In fact, we met one of the developers who joined the IREC 2024 as a speaker, and he said, scarcity is the name of the game. Again, why? Now, to make a fair comparison, I've taken KL plus the surrounding Selangor bits, which makes sense economically, called Greater KL, which is about 1,500 kilometers, against Metro Manila's 640 kilometers. It's about 2.5 times smaller and yet twice as dense, 8.8 million versus about 15 million people in 2024. But the thing is, about 35% of their population lives in slums. And that's not hard to believe. Just take a look at Google Maps and try to understand for yourself how unique of a city Manila is. There are about 16 different city districts the main ones being Makati and BGC. And think of these like the heart of Kuala Lumpur, but instead of one heart and one CBD, there's multiple. It all started with Makati, the financial hub of the Philippines, and next following this was BGC, which was another very successful CBD. Problem is, there isn't any more land in the area. And so developers are trying to form their own townships and claiming to be the next BGC in different locations across Metro Manila. And I think another big factor is traffic. If you're trying to get around Metro Manila at peak time, it can take up to 2 hours. And there have been people who actually take up to 6 hours just because they can't afford to live closer to where they work because they live further in the outskirts of the city. And that's why it's so important for all of these different townships to be as all-encompassing as possible, to have the ability to provide what people need without having to travel too far away. And I think because of the density and the slums and the traffic, these things kind of combine and force this unique city to come about. You know, multiple CBDs, even though the size technically is smaller than Greater KL. And so far, I visited places like Bridgetown and Eastwood, Makati, of course, and Bayside, etc. And each of these supposed CBDs are first-rate. Wide roads, clean streets, great architecture, to a point it feels almost like a first-world country. But if you drive 5 minutes away, you're surrounded by a sea of slums. So, how are property prices so high again? Well, wouldn't you want to be away from the slums too? Remember, Manila is twice as dense as Greater KL, with arguably less usable land because of these slums. The demand and supply kind of makes sense. But I also thought, why don't you just take the slums and push it somewhere else, right? Well, the National Housing Association, NHA, is the only government-supported association to help relocate slums further out of Metro Manila. And in exchange, just like land acquisition, they will give you small plots of land and actual ownership to build their homes. Now, this is a big thing for people who are living in the slums, but also these are people living in the slums. How's that gonna go? Will it turn into another slum but just further out? Well, not really, because they actually do take pride in this piece of land that is now theirs, that is truly their own home. However, it does play out a little bit like a video game. They get land and they build as they go. As they get money, they upgrade. Maybe an extension for the kitchen, maybe they put in a gate for the front door. You know, maybe there's no priority on the private bedroom, so it's as they need, right? Hopefully it won't be as interesting as it is now. Hopefully it will get better. Now, let's take a look at acquiring a property. Bank interest rates at 6.5% up to 10 for shorter terms. Now, this is actually more comparable to our commercial loans than our residential loans in Malaysia, right? Age 70 as well, that's the same. Down payment is similar at 10 to 20% of the property price. But they also have something interesting here called balloon payment, where the money installment is lowered and pushed to the end as a lump sum, which is effective but potentially quite dangerous if you think about it. And there are schemes that actually offer zero interest on the first 20% of the property. Another interesting thing, developers offer in-house financing, accessible financing at a higher interest rate than the bank, right? But if land is so scarce and there's so much of the population lives in such conditions, who are they targeting? Middle income? High income foreigners? Maybe? Why have such enticing easy entry payment schemes? Now, this. You've worked overseas for years, decades even, and you lived in a nice cozy apartment or landed house. You get a fairly decent income, no rent, no bills, and with some luck, a caring employer that becomes family, home away from home. But then you start to miss it, so you visit. You return to the Philippines, And visiting is the most amazing week of your year. You smile, you laugh, you reconnect, you're home. But then before you know it, you're on a plane heading back. Now, if you were just staring blankly at the screen, I'm sorry that wasn't as interesting as I thought it would be. But now you have thousands of people who have gotten used to the certain standard of living who might be coming back to their living families. In the slums, wouldn't you want to provide a home? And the same thing goes for people who are living locally as well. So you have low entry costs and very flexible financing, and same goes for anywhere else in the world. Sales is sales, right? But please do get educated, right? Of course, these options are only there to aid those less fortunate to achieve their dreams. But I think it's very easy to be confused and blindly hopeful, because entry is easy, but maintaining and exiting, especially with things like balloon financing and the amount of oversupply in Manila, exiting is not easy. And if you're an investor, it's a very different story. Same goes for anywhere else in the world, but it seems more prevalent in such demographics. Anyway, moving on. Middle income citizens. Minimum wages are here at about 20,000 pesos. That's about 1,600 ringgit, which is actually no different from us before budget 2025. But fresh grads here get about 25 to 35,000 pesos. That's about 2,300, slightly lower than us. But the average rental rates for a bare minimum, say 270 square feet room, is about 20,000 pesos. And I'm talking studio. Now that's the same price as my Miller Square unit in Oakland Road, a fully furnished high demand location because of its proximity to many offices, compared to a lower end unit in a less desirable area for the same price. But we earn the same salary, Malaysia and Philippines, and it's 70% of your salary. That's like living in Singapore. But 5 years later, depending on the field you're in, you could be looking at maybe 40,000 to 70,000. That's averaging about 4,200 ringgit. So you can kind of start to see why developers give such appealing financing options here in the Philippines. Now let's take a look at the higher income side. Remember, these are first world infrastructure CBDs. Makati, Bayside, BGC, think Mont Kiara and Desa Park, but wider. Now, we were brought to visit some of the higher end developments in Bridgetown, one of the CBDs that are claiming to be the next BGC, but it's only 30% developed, claiming potential for capital appreciation. We were looking at 8.6 ringgit per square foot rental in the area. That's about 5,000 plus per month, and about 0.85 per square feet maintenance, all converted to ringgit, right? Now for context, that's pretty similar to places like Bukit Bintang, right? Except this isn't even the most highly desirable area in Manila, right? So that's pretty interesting. You know, sale prices were about 2,500 per square feet, but it's bare. And if you were to compare to BGC or Makati, the most desirable places, it's almost 3,000 per square feet. Now, if you're a foreign investor, they do boast about 8 to 9% year on year, but it drops to about 2 to 3% for lower end properties and 5 to 6% for medium end properties. At least so they claim. Do take it with a pinch of salt. This is from the developer's mouth, but at least it's only for hot growing CBDs, just to give an idea of the capital appreciation that has been going on so far in the past couple of years, right? So in that sense, it's kind of like the higher end ones are desirable more so than the lower end ones, and it kind of makes you think, you know, if you have the money and if you're a foreign investor and you got the cash, yeah, you can invest, you know, not too much risk about that. But if you can't and you're just like on the lower end, and maybe you're local there and you buy low end property because that's how you can afford, you can only enjoy about 2 to 3% growth each year, assuming those numbers are true, right? But they do protect their own people, having said that, by implementing a maximum of 40% foreign ownership rule, which helps to prevent disasters like Forest City or similar ghost townships, but they do also encourage foreign investment by enforcing a foreign investment visa that actually grants a PR. So in conclusion, you have a city that is twice as dense as Greater KL, where scarcity is the name of the game. You have first world infrastructure, wide, clean streets, spacious, abundant, yet surrounded by a sea of slums, dense, crowded, and yet hopeful, right? You have expensive high-rise properties rivaling that of first world countries, yet minimum wages of a developing nation. Would you invest? Well, yeah, if you know what you're doing, and if you've got the money, it's definitely possible. The demand is there, the growth is there, and Manila has more developments popping up than KL itself, almost twice as much across the various CBDs. I think for us it's about 6 to 8 per month. For them, it's double, right? But there are risks as well, right? You can enjoy the capital gains, but on the other hand, on the rent side, can it cover the installment? And in fact, is it even fair to ask that question outside of Malaysia? Acquiring is easy, but exiting in the Filipino market isn't. And if you're a local looking for a home, the consensus seems to be buying a piece of land and building it with a contractor a little further away seems to be the most ideal choice. So anyway, I hope this has been informative. Again, I'm not even close to being an expert on any of this. This is just an attempt to study a foreign market, and my first one at that. I hope I've managed to paint a nice picture of my first time visiting the Philippines, and I'm very grateful, to MIEA and to PAREB for making this possible. And our host at PAREB was just extremely kind, extremely generous, going the extra mile for us, taking her own time out for us, and thank you all so much. And yeah, bye.